For the past 12 hours or so, several opposition MPs from across India have raised concerns regarding a security alert that they've received on their iPhones, saying that through a state-sponsored terror attack, their phone could have been compromised. And today we have speaking to us about the finer aspects of this issue, Mr. Prateek Waghre, the Policy Director at Internet Freedom Foundation, to understand the finer aspects of what this means, what can it be its possible repercussions, and where the story is going to go forward from here. Prateek, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to India today. I'm sure you had the time to catch up on everything that's been happening in India for the past several hours. So to start it off, what do you think this security alert that Apple has issued that's gone out to certain opposition MPs actually means? Is it a actual cause for concern for these MPs? Does it mean that their phone has been compromised in any way?
Sure. Thanks for having me. And this is still very much an evolving story, and I think we'll get to know over the next couple of hours the range of actors who've been affected by or received this sort of notification. Right now, this is something that Apple seems to have started in November 2021, where they would send users notification of potentially being the targets of a state-sponsored attack of this sort, right? And the way they do it, or the way they say they do it, and of course they don't give you specifics to a large extent, because if they put that information out, it's possible for people who are engaging with such attacks or perpetrating them to evade detection, right? So they can't really put out the actual methodology of how they detect these attacks, but that's what they do. So the idea is that you in such cases you typically look for what's called as an attack signature, based on similarities of how other actors or people, or in other instances where they may have attributed to a state actor or a state sponsored actor, and they look for similarities and then try to when there are similar attacks or similar patterns that they observe in case of other users, they send out these notifications. Right now, the way it's worded, and understandably it's worded quite ambiguously also, in the sense that, look, your device may have been compromised, and then they of course advise you to get it checked up, etc. Right? So it's not, the message itself is not conclusive that its device has actually been compromised. But it is alarming enough that someone should take precaution, because in a situation like this, you normally have a pretty high threshold for something like this to get triggered and to send out what are likely automated notifications to a number of accounts or number of Apple ID accounts, right? That's that's one aspect of it. Then you also have to look at it in the specific aspect of the currently with the news that's unfolding, the fact that it's mostly tending to be members of parliament from the opposition, prominent politicians, etc. And like I said, we might see that list expanding as more and more people put this information out. That makes it a little extra concerning, I would say, right? Because you also have to look at the history of the fact that in India over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had multiple instances of this sort. Right, there was in 2019 number of users on WhatsApp, right? It was again politicians, journalists, rights defenders who got a notification from WhatsApp saying that they may have been the target of an attack. There was of course the extensive Pegasus revelations, which listed a number of Indians, again, a lot of them politicians, journalists, rights defenders. So you also have to look at it in that context, and it is certainly concerning from that perspective.
If I'm not wrong, the message that's gone out from Apple specifically says that these individuals may have been targeted because of who they are or what they do. So do you think the fact that they are relevant voices within the opposition has a role to play in this whole attack? The fact that they have specifically individually been targeted, possible attack rather?
And so that goes back to the point, right? That if you look at the type of people who are coming out and who've been identified so far, it is largely vocal opposition voices, right? So you can speculate with a high degree of confidence that that likely played a role, right? In terms of Apple's messaging itself, it's also important to consider that some part of the message is likely templated, right? Now it is of course but like I said, they potentially do have a high threshold after which they send the message, right? So they've obviously detected some activity that they've noted with concern, right? To then send out the message. But the messaging itself seems to be fairly consistent across the set of people who've got it, at least for the message that I've read so far. But so if you look at the fact that, or the likelihood that it's a very high threshold after which Apple have decided to send these messages, and the nature of the people who've been affected by it, certainly their political leanings, the fact that they're vocal members of parliament, etc. And again, like I said, we'll probably see more names coming out as well. But that certainly probably
Prateek, what do we
played a role.
understand by state-sponsored attacks? And if Apple is saying that it's possibly a state-sponsored attack, and at the same time, they are also claiming that these messages have gone out to people across 150 countries. Does that mean that within each of those countries, the government may be responsible? Because the government of India is claiming that it's gone out to 150 countries. There is no way of saying that the government of India itself is responsible. So can you throw some light on what exactly state-sponsored attack means?
Yeah, so they don't clearly define state sponsored, right? But the indication is that they're using patterns, or they're using methods that require a high degree of investment, etc., which is likely to come from a state sponsored actor who has those resources at their disposal, right? It's not going to get, I think. And it's not going to be more specific than that at any stage, because again, even attribution, etc., is in these cases is not exact, right? You are determining, or you're looking at patterns, you're looking at similarities, and then trying to map back to who else has used similar patterns, similar methods to do that. So the attribution is never likely to be 100%, but you normally get to a point where you can say so the degrees of confidence vary, right? And the expectation is that if Apple is sending out such a notification, it has a high degree of confidence that it hits those thresholds, right, of whatever they define as as an attack signature that likely uses or likely can be carried out only by an actor that has a significant amount of investment, resources, etc., at their disposal.
Another concern that's come out is that there was a statement that was earlier put out, attributable to sources, of course, where they said that it might be a possible algorithm malfunction. So is it common for such messages to go out to Apple users? Is this something that happens on a regular basis? And two, can any sort of an algorithm malfunction actually result in these messages being sent out to such a large number of people?
Yeah, so I think so we don't have, I think, a lot of clarity on how often these messages go out, etc. That's not something, to my knowledge, that Apple has compiled anywhere. They would be the most authentic source of this information, right? If they were to come out and say, "Hey, we sent out so many messages a year to people in so many countries," that would probably be your most authentic source of this information. But we don't know. But from news reports, if you look for these instances over the last couple of years, they often tend to be in countries where, and again, it often, at least the targets, the ones that get reported at least tend to be rights defenders, journalists, activists, etc., right? That seems to be the pattern, at least of the ones that make it to the news, right? Now there's probably a large number or there's probably some number that's invisible to us because they never get reported on. So there is that element to consider. Now on the bit of the algorithmic malfunction. Now again, it's one of those things that you can't rule out completely. Systems do go haywire sometimes. You can't do that out, but it's worth noting that Apple themselves don't seem to have said that, at least in whatever statement that's being attributed to them, right? So while you can't you can't say with 100% certainty that that it was not an algorithmic malfunction. it is, that is something then that, there needs to be, I think, a demand for Apple to come out clean and say, hey, okay, this was a glitch or something like that, right? And again, it's not uncommon. We've seen, not Apple, but we've seen, in other instances, Meta, etc., coming out and claiming something was a glitch when you had users complaining that their posts were being restricted or something like that, right? So yes, glitches do happen. Now, is this a glitch for, in this particular instance? That is now for the company to confirm, right? And them not confirming it is a strong signal that it probably isn't.
Another question I have is that Apple, of course, has a very strong security system. They have privacy guidelines in place. It's one of the safest devices that you can use. If all of these messages have been sent out to Apple users, is there a possibility that, say, Android users or non-Apple users who also might be significant voices within the public might have been subjected to this attack, but by virtue of the fact that they don't have Apple devices, did not get any alert or are not aware whether or not they might have been subjected to such a possible attack?
It's certainly possible. So in past instances of spyware, and especially forensic investigations where organizations like Citizen Lab, etc., have found markers, right, and they've done essentially trace analysis on devices, then it tends to be the case, and of course this is not always, it's not necessarily that it's always true, but it tends to be the case that on iOS you have more markers or more logs available to you to determine whether to forensically analyze and try to piece back and identify a pattern. There seem to be fewer instances of that, fewer cases of that on Android, right? So there is certainly a possibility that people who are if you are, I think, a vocal opposition MP on an Android device, you should also be concerned, right? It's not something that the point being that just because Apple is sending notification doesn't mean it's something that affects only Apple users. It's likely to have affected others as well, right? And a situation like this it probably calls for some amount of extra caution, depending on what security researchers say your threat model, right, or how likely you are to be targeted if you belong in a similar cohort.
Right. So, Prateek, what is the way forward now for these MPs? I know the government is, in a statement, the IT minister has come out and said that they've initiated an inquiry already. They've initiated an investigation. But is there any possible way for this investigation to happen without the opposition MPs or any others who have been targeted through this, without them having to submit their devices for forensic examination, or how will the investigation now proceed?
No, so you will need the actual device to be analyzed, right? If to determine whether it's been affected or not, right? So I think that to my knowledge, there isn't a way to actually determine that without looking at the specific device itself. But the broader lesson is that people do need to start operating with some level of paranoia and concern, right? In terms of their devices or the safety of their devices, how likely they are to be compromised, right? I think that is an active calculation that needs to happen if you are a vocal opposition voice today.
And also, which is the right authority to take up this investigation and to ensure that a fair probe is done as to whether or not, because if it's, say, possibly the government has been involved in this entire operation, then the government doing a probe into itself might not be the best possible, fairest solution out of this, right? So which authority do you think will be able to do unbiased?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know if I necessarily have a good answer to that from the perspective of what is the incentive of the actor that's doing it to conduct an impartial investigation, right? Which is so an alternative is that you constitute a quote unquote independent committee to to do the investigation, that has technical experts conduct a forensic analysis. But there's also one thing to keep in mind, in the sense that we saw some of that happening in the Pegasus case, but the report's findings were never made public, right? And that to us still remains a matter of of concern, in the sense that we don't know. It was one of those sealed cover situations where we actually don't know what the details of the report were. Some parts of it were read out, but really that's all we have, right? So there
Also,
needs
the
to be.
government never categorically said that they were not conducting surveillance, even during the time when Pegasus was going on in Supreme Court. So do you think it has any reflection on what we are seeing happening currently right now?
Sorry, I missed the last part.
I said, do you think that has any reflection on what we are seeing happening right now? The fact that once again, all of these MPs are alleging that their phones are being surveilled and the government is interfering with their privacy?
Yeah, look, so you certainly can't ignore that context of history, right? In the sense that, as I was saying, there have been multiple instances of this in the past, and we've not had the findings that were made in past investigations made public. And as you pointed out, there wasn't a very clear position put forth by the government themselves on whether they use such technologies or not, right? So you certainly can't ignore that past context.
Just one last question, Prateek, before I let you go. The message that has been sent out by Apple itself says that there is a possibility that this might be a false alert of some sort. So how possible is it that, like we discussed earlier, that it's just a technical glitch, or do these people who've got this alert actually have a reason to be concerned about?
Yeah, no, so I would say they do have a reason to be concerned about, until such time as maybe Apple comes out very categorically and says that, look, this was a glitch, right? And there was something that went wrong, and it affected it affected users. Because the other thing to also note is that, again, and this is based on the names we have in public so far, it's very clear that there is a certain political leaning, certain political dynamic to that, right? If it, and this is again, to some degree speculation, but if it was a broader glitch per se, you would have seen an indiscriminate set of actors being at the
possibly would have got this
possibly, right, exactly. So exactly, right. It would not have been such a specific set of. It's unlikely to have been such a specific set of people who have gotten that message. But like I said, ultimately, in that particular scenario, I think it's like for Apple to really come out and say that, hey, this was a glitch, and this is what happened, right? But the current statement that I've read doesn't seem to actually say that, right? It says that they don't attribute it to a particular state sponsor, to a particular actor, and right. So and that they will not be able to share more information because it affects it could potentially help such actors evade future detection or evade detection in general, right? So if I'm reading a little bit between the lines, that on the second part of that, it does seem to suggest that they don't want to put out the specific details, because there is a concern that it will reveal some part of their operations, and they want to, they probably want to withhold that information, right? Which takes me away from the glitch or the malfunction explanation. But as I said, right, some of this is of course this is speculation, with some degree of confidence, I'll say. But it's for Apple to really confirm that.
On that note, thank you so much, Prateek, for taking out the time. Like you said, it's a developing story. Every hour, we're hearing something new. So I'm sure we'll be in touch with you through most of it. And thank you once again for speaking to India Today and taking out.
Thank you for having me.